Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. I am punching through content at the moment, mainly because I'm doing stuff I enjoy more, which is just talking about my opinions, things I see, and I'm learning how I want this channel to go. I'm actually enjoying making stuff a lot more. I'll be interested to know if you're more interested in hearing it. But what I'm sort of bouncing off today is this idea, or the news that came out today that Breitling pulled out of Baselworld 2020. At the time, like everyone, I was a little surprised, not completely, given that Breitling had announced back last year that they'd joined the Federation Haute Horology, which is the group that kind of runs SIHH. So I must admit, I was always half expecting this to happen anyway. But then with all the positive coverage that Breitling got kind of out of Baselworld, I think there was a sense maybe they'd hang around. But having heard the news, gone back and done the research, it's actually plainly obvious why Breitling's done it, and it's actually made me think very hard about the future of Baselworld. And that's really what I want to talk about today. That is, what does Breitling's decision to go away, what does that signal about the future of Baselworld? And this is where I'm going to be a little bit contrarian and say something a little bit different to the rest of the YouTube commentariat. It's commonly held, it's the common wisdom that that Baselworld's suffering a bit of a hit, but as long as Rolex and Patek stick by the show, it has a future. And maybe that's true, but on the other hand, I think they are also crippling the show. And they're crippling the show because they suck all the oxygen out of the room for every other brand, or at least every other kind of major brand at the show. Every other major brand has to live off the leftovers of Rolex Tudor and Patek. And look at myself to start with. I'm not into any of those brands. I don't own any of those watches. I don't have an emotional connection with them. They're good watches. I respect all of those brands, but I just don't feel anything for them. I'm not going to buy them. And yet, when I sat down to do my predictions video, the first one I looked at was Rolex Tudor. When I sat down to do my wrap-up video, the first one I did was Rolex Tudor. When I was curious, so I started having these thoughts and I started doing some half-assed research, and I thought, now I knew from consuming a lot of the media that a lot of the media had also, like me, focused heavily on Rolex Tudor and Patek. But I wanted something, I was curious to see just how far that went. So I actually did some half-assed research. Yep, and you're free to have a go at me for the fact that it is half-assed, but then on the other hand, no one's paying me for this, so I'm only going to do a certain amount. And had a look at the Hodinkee website. So you can go to the Hodinkee website, look at their Baselworld 2019 area, and it's got all the articles and everything they did. And geez, they punched out a lot. They did like 65 odd articles, podcasts, and videos around Baselworld 2019. I counted 53 of those videos or articles related to specific watches or watch ranges. Now, so if you look at those 53, 12 of them related strictly to Rolex Tudor. So that's 23% of all of the content they put out was about those two brands alone. Another 7 of those articles, so another 13%, were about Patek. So that's a total of 36%. Over a third of their articles were around those brands, Rolex Tudor and Patek. So already the other, 150, 200, 300 watch brands are scrabbling amongst themselves for maybe a video each, an article each, maybe 2 articles if you're really lucky. It gets even more interesting if you go into some of the sort of the wrap-up videos where the guys from Hodinkee, guys and girl from Hodinkee, will sit down and talk about what they see. And so they did their preview show. In that preview show, they mentioned 16 different watches that they were interested in coming out. Fully half of them were either Rolex Tudors or Pateks. There were 4 that were Rolex Tudors and there were 4 that were Pateks. So in all of the other brands, the hundreds of other watches got 8 mentions, whereas Rolex Tudor got the other half. If you looked at how they assessed their guilty pleasure watches when they made that thing, a third of the watches were Rolex Tudors. When they did their best everyday wearers, a third of the watches were Rolex Tudors. To put this another way, if you're Rolex Tudor and you've got a well-established watch, but you bring it out in a two-tone variant and change nothing else, you will get an article about you. But if you're Breitling and you completely revise your entire Super Ocean range, coming up with new sizes, new materials, new gender-neutral variants, totally change the aesthetic on it, for Hodinkee, you didn't even get an article. So the question then becomes, why on earth, not why does Breitling leave, but why on earth did they turn up in the first place? What's the point? Now, let me say one thing. I'm not in any way saying that media outlets like Hodinkee are somehow shills for Rolex, somehow getting kickbacks or there's some collusion here. That is absolutely not the case. Well, at least I can't say that it's not, but I think that I'd be stunned if that was the case. Rather, it's just the other way around. They're media companies. They make money by getting eyeballs on their screen. They get eyeballs on their screen if they mention one of three words. Rolex, or 4 words. Rolex, Tudor, Patek, or funnily enough, G-Shock, which doesn't really help you a lot in this debate. They know that. Of course, that's what they're going to cover. So, again, they just report what we want to see. The trouble is, we don't seem to want to see anything but those 4 things. So, going back, I have to ask the question again. Given that these big companies like Rolex and LVMH, or the LVMH group companies, they're smart guys. They know that this is what's going to happen. The question becomes not why are they leaving, but why are they even bothering to come in the first place? Because the best you can hope for is in an off year, you might get some leftovers. You might get the things that fall from the table of Rolex, Tudor and Patek. And is that really what you want to be? Even when you win, you lose. Even when you win and you have a great year, all you get is sort of the leftovers of someone else, and you get sort of patted on the head and told, congratulations, you had a really good effort and you were very strong second place this year. So I don't think we should be surprised that Breitling is leaving. I think it makes total sense. More on that Breitling thing, I mean, one of the things that really struck me as I went back and looked at the content that companies actually put out and remembered what they were talking about in their podcasts and their videos, is there was this constant discussion about how in the absence of Swatch, Omega had left and opened up this big area, and now you could look straight down the main hall and you could see Breitling at the end. You could clearly see their booth better, but judging from the coverage, no one bothered walking in, taking photos of the watches and sticking much on the internet. So again, why would they bother going back? And in future, when this all shakes itself out, if I was running the LVMH groups, I'd be asking myself, why would I go? Now, if I'm Zodiac or I'm on those little companies who get no coverage of their own, I'm kind of a remora fish around a shark, then it makes sense to hang around Baselworld because you want the leftovers. You want what Rolex and Patek leave when they've killed something. But if you're Breitling, if you're an LVMH brand, if you regard yourself as a serious player, going to Baselworld marks you out as a loser. So why would you go? So what do I think the future of Baselworld is? I think the future of Baselworld is increasingly Rolex, Tudor and Patek. I think they're going to call it, it's going to become their show. They will probably move from a third to 40% of the coverage to 50 to 60% of the coverage. I think that a lot of very small brands and some independents will probably hover around them. But I think the other mid-level brands which are major players but just don't swing a bat heavy enough to go with Rolex, Tudor or Patek, they're just going to bugger off and leave. And I can't say as I blame them. So that's my take. That's what I think is going to happen. I'm not surprised, except now that I think about it, I'm kind of surprised Breitling even went this year. And frankly, I'm kind of glad they've made this move. Anyway, that's my thoughts. I'd be curious to know what you think. Jump on and give me some comments, and thanks very much. Bye.